On this episode of the SurgeonMasters mini podcast, I have with me our guest, Dr. Stuart Slavin. He's the senior scholar for well-being at the ACGME and a pediatrician by training. Stuart, you've been super active in the well-being movement over the last 10 years. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Pleasure to be with you.
So with our guests, we always want to, get as much critical information from you as we can in our short time frame. So I was hoping you could tell us a bit about what you've learned over those 10 years that maybe highlights on some key points.
It's been really interesting to watch the well-being movement kind of change and mature over the last 10 years or so. And frankly, sometimes it feels a little disappointing. I think sometimes it feels like we're a little stuck. And I wrote a piece recently that really focuses on this idea that maybe we shouldn't be focusing so directly on well-being, which tends to be things like meditation and yoga and exercise and nutrition, which are all important and good. I would never discount those things, but they tend to be add-ons into our life that we expect people to do outside of work. And for physicians, for medical students, for residents, what I think we should be doing is focusing much more on their experience of work or of school, of residency. And if we did that, if that was our primary focus, I think that we would be making more headway in well-being overall.
It's really interesting because over the last time frame, I've noticed a similar thing. And my mindset is interesting because to me, as I organize it in my mind, I actually include all those things. But I think it's a key point that how other people are receiving the information matters. And so elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that people have been saying a lot about, we need to work on systems and change the system so that it is more supportive of physicians and a better workplace. But I honestly don't see a huge amount of movement in that direction. And I guess the thing that I would add to it is that one of the things that I think people are focusing on in the environment when they talk about these stressors is the amount of work, productivity pressures, frustrations of the medical record. And again, those are all really important, but they're challenging to change. There's a financial imperative and that's significant. And what I'm also very interested in, less systems issue and more the culture. What is the feel of the place? What does the work experience feel like to people? And that attracts me because I think we can make a lot of progress there without a huge investment of money, frankly.
That's fantastic. Certainly the words that you're using, they're hitting me really well. So then if it's satisfaction and the experience, the physician experience or the surgeon experience or the healthcare professional experience, then what are some of those simple things that we can do?
Yeah, a lot of it is just the human interactions that occur all day long. And especially if you're in a position where you are not at the top of the hierarchy, but you're somewhere in the middle or lower down, how are you treated by your supervisors? How are you treated by the people in charge? And do you feel valued? Do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? Do you feel appreciated? I visited probably 20 academic medical centers before the pandemic over a year and a half, 2 years. And I don't think there was a single place where physicians, faculty really felt, oh yeah, I really feel appreciated and valued. Does your voice matter? Are you included in big decisions that have a significant impact on your life? Is there a sense of connection and community? And then one, which I think is, sadly, it is missing for too many physicians, is there a sense of meaning and purpose in your work? You feel gratified? And is there a culture that supports all of that? I think we've kind of lost our way, understandably, especially in the midst of the pandemic and all of the stresses. But I think those are the areas that really interest me in terms of saying, can we make a difference in this work environment so it's just a better place to be?
So you highlight that a lot of the places you've been and the sense that it's rare. And so I just hoping you can help us shift it towards the positive of what positive things can we do to start making some change?
Really, a couple of things I would say immediately, which is I think there's a risk that many people feel like they have no real opportunity to influence the environment, the culture, and that's a mistake. If people go through life thinking it's up to the C-suite or the department chair or your bosses to fix this problem, yeah, they're important figures. they do need to work on things like communication and appreciation and rewards and fairness. Those are things that leadership must do, but they can't do the work alone. Every single one of us is a participant, is a co-creator of the culture around us. And I don't care where you are in the hierarchy of medicine. You can have an impact on the little microenvironment that you engage with every day. And so I think there's some very simple things people can do to make a healthier environment. And I guess what I would add to this is that I think one of the things that I've seen, again, before the pandemic, and I think it's probably gotten worse, was there was a huge amount of negativity and cynicism and pessimism and even anger. And I think, again, all those are understandable, all understandable. What I would ask your audience is, do you want to live in that feeling, right? It's okay to feel those things, but do you want it to permeate your life? And to some degree, this is really about making a choice. And it's a hard choice. Do you want to live in negativity and pessimism and anger, or do you want to move yourself and those around you to a better place?
I'm hearing both top down and bottom up to change that culture. And so for all of them, what are some, just simple steps that they can do to start bringing that satisfaction and that positive experience back?
One is just simple awareness of how's your mood. If it's persistently negative, I guess I go to Viktor Frankl, who's influenced me in a lot of ways, the noted psychiatrist, neurologist, and Holocaust survivor. And I think it's particularly true in today's world where we feel like we have little control over anything in our lives. What he talked about is what he described as the last of human freedoms. To choose one's own attitude, no matter the circumstance, to choose one's own way. And it's really difficult. But I think what we need to do is say, no, I have that under my control. And it's not easy. And I think the more we move simply to be more positive with people, to be more generous with people, to say thank you, to express gratitude, to be generous of spirit, the more it will come back towards us. And I guess the thing that I would also say from Frankl that is so important is that he would say that finding a meaning in one's life is going to be the most important thing you can do in terms of sustaining yourself. And I think for many physicians, if you've lost a sense of meaning, you've lost your way because it's there for you every day. Goodness gracious, surgeons, talk about the potential you have to have an impact, extraordinary impact on people's lives. And tap into that wonder, tap into that joy. You should feel immense pride. And so that's the big M meaning, but there's a little m meaning, which I think is more not just being part of a cause greater than yourself, but also finding little moments of meanings with your micro interactions, with your peers, with your patients, with your families. Making those connections, even in a busy, demanding, frustrating world, I think can sustain as well.
Those are great initial points as to what is simple strategies to take on a hard problem and a hard choice. You want to say that in your words?
Yeah, no, you're the way I talk about it is so easy, right? I mean, and it's not. This is really hard work.
Hard work to do simple steps.
Yes,
right?
It is. And that's what's exciting about it too, is it's reorienting yourself and saying, I can choose to think differently and I can choose to live differently. And I will say, sometimes this work is difficult on one's own. And I think sometimes, having a therapist to help with some of these can be helpful as well. But the more we take and look at these things as choices, I think it's really helpful. And I think one of the things that goes along with this is some sense of awareness of your thoughts and emotions so that when you feel frustrated or angry or something like that, you notice it and say, okay, do I want to stay feeling like this or do I want to feel differently and move to a different place? And a lot of the work I've done and holds, I think, a lot of promise in this work is cognitive restructuring, which forms the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, in which we often have exaggerated and distorted reactions to negative events in our lives that actually make our personal outcome worse. And the more we see those cognitive distortions, the more we're able to see kind of problematic mindsets like perfectionism or potentially imposter phenomenon or others that can be strongly correlated with adverse mental health outcomes, the more we can see those, the more we can operate to work with those. And I would just encourage people as a resource, ACGME, learn at ACGME. There's a website that has, podcasts and videos that I've put together that really teach these tools, which are very simple tools for people to use so that they can start to see kind of the dysfunctional thinking that we're all prone to. So
that's great. I mean, it all often comes back to this wording that you had about our experience, that time at work, and that the experience at work and our career is super important. It's a bit about the culture and trying to bring in some of this positive, and that there's lots of resources. And you gave a great example of ones that you shared of some of the subset of these skills that, if I understand you correctly, it brings back to then the return on the investment is that you're going to have that improved satisfaction.
No question. And what I love about especially the tools that I tend to emphasize is they take little or no time to use. And we have to be really careful, because I know that there are people who say, oh, do this, do that, and suddenly, it's an hour extra in your day. And your audience doesn't have that time. They aren't going to make those choices. So I think trying to make these kind of tools accessible for people, and so that they can build them into their lives is really important and can be very helpful. Yeah.
So as part of our longer conversation on these subjects, those skills, that's a resource. You mentioned sort of integrating some of these things on a small micro basis, like pick up one of them, work on it for a while, always can tap into another one. But having something in this frame or material that you're doing on a regular basis.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And some of it is, I think, reorienting yourself at times to your work and your life. And I'll just say an example. There's a term that has gotten very popular, right, of work-life balance. And work-life balance is a really dangerous one, because it sounds like there's work and then you get to experience life outside of work. If you aren't getting a sense of life in work, you're missing something, right? And so I think recapture that sense of fulfillment and joy and satisfaction in the work of a physician is just critically important. And I know you're into very much a coaching model that I think is incredibly valuable. This isn't necessary. This doesn't indicate, if somebody's struggling, it doesn't indicate necessarily that they have some psychopathology. But I think we can lose our way in our work and fall into these kind of mental traps and patterns of thinking and living that we aren't even aware of. And what excites me about whether, it's these mindsets or these cognitive distortions, what's so wonderful about them is every one of them can be changed. We can all grow. And physicians, of course, are intelligent people. And often I think that they can actually adapt and adopt these tools relatively easily in ways that can, I think, have a huge impact on their satisfaction and ultimately their well-being.
So it's fantastic information, and I like how you're sharing that. If you wouldn't mind, kind of put this a little bit in perspective of how you see it being so tapped into the ACGME and our education. So, we have medical students, we have residents, we have fellows, and we're all doing some element of continuing medical education throughout our careers. So share with me a little bit about how that gets applied across the levels in our medical training.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I'd respond to that question with is that if, for those in your audience who get the opportunity to teach medical students or residents, et cetera, again, I think sometimes their orientation is, it's an extra burden, another task I have to do. Reframing it as what a great opportunity to have to be able to have a positive impact on the growth and trajectory of a young person. What could be more satisfying than that in many ways? But again, I think we can fall into these negative mindsets and view the world through this kind of very negative lens. And I guess really ultimately, let me add to this, that I think one of the problems with well-being movements is that it's focused a lot on all of these positive things you can do. to improve your life. Again, the meditation, yoga, exercise, nutrition, all of those things, wonderful. I think what we need to also be looking at is the negative forces in our lives, in the work, and in our own minds and hearts, that if we can mitigate those, reduce the impact of those negative forces, we're going to move into a positive place. In some ways that I think there's more potential there than throwing a bunch of add-ons to people who are already like way too busy and have too many things on their to-do list.
Excellent point. So any that you've discovered or anything that you think others have discovered that are worth sharing as far as things to mitigate?
Yeah, I guess the one that I'll throw at you, I'll try to describe quickly, is emotional self-regulation, our responses to kind of frustrating events that happen at work and in life. And I came up with a tool that I realized I had to work on that, not because of frustration at work and how I managed it, how I've managed it at home with my spouse and children. And so I came up with something called grocery line mindfulness, because grocery lines used to make me completely nuts. And I say that because I always chose the slowest line. And if there are people like that out there, they know what I'm talking about. And grocery line mindfulness is really a simple thing, is you have to notice either your thoughts or a physical sensation of stress. And when you're starting to feel that, what you want to do is create a pause, just a little space. And in that space, you make your reaction a choice. Okay, you can't default into anger and frustration and bitterness. If you want to choose that, go ahead. But when you make it a choice, in a grocery line, it feels absurd to do that. It's not going to move the line faster. It's not going to make you feel any better, et cetera. So I love that, because what's helpful is what you're doing is kind of hijacking your amygdala, so that your amygdala doesn't fire really quickly and you can become much less emotionally reactive. Takes a while, takes practice, because this is really kind of a neuroplasticity issue. You're changing the wiring of your brain. But what I love about it then is it's really effective no matter the stimulus, because it's the same neural pathway. So if you feel like you're an emotionally reactive person, to me, oh my gosh, it made a huge difference in my life. And what I love about it, again, a tool that takes literally no time at all.
Great point. And I would highlight that even those that are overall pretty calm, there's some space in their life where it's less. So even they can use that skill in that new space.
No question. Yeah. As
we close out this podcast, I was hoping you could reshare the resource of other things that you have for everybody.
Sure. And I'm happy to have you post it if you have a place on your website. But if you just Google Learn at ACGME, there is both podcasts and videos there. And then the second, I would say, any podcast platform, ACGME Aware, AWARE, you'll be able to find a series of like 4 podcasts that I do that really teach these tools, and very accessible. Each one is only something like 25 minutes or so. So I encourage people to listen.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us and being our guest.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it, Jeff.
This is Jeff Smith with the SurgeonMasters podcast, and our guest, Dr. Stuart Slavin. Thanks for joining us. Ciao.